for joining me. I want to walk you through a real quick overview of the 2020 entry form for the Eastern Kentucky Hay Contest, and also the data entry for the livestock that you may be collecting information on for rations to be balanced. So I'm going to jump over to that document right now, and we will take a look. You'll notice right away, if you were part of this last year, that the form has changed quite a bit. And right up front, one of the first things you're going to see that's different is that big rectangle at the top right, and it says place label here. Brian Jeffers has been kind enough to generate the sample lab number and put that on labels for you. Every sample will have a unique lab number. And that label will go in that upper right-hand column, upper right-hand box right there on the form. So as you go to the farm and you've got this form, you may do it either before you go to the farm or as you're on the farm or when you get back to the office. But as you will find, keeping track and keeping numbers on all of the papers that we generate to follow a sample is going to be very crucial. So we're going to assume you're going to go ahead and put that number on when you get to the farm or even before. So you put that label right there. The first thing we're going to do is fill out whether what you are sampling is going to be in the contest or not, and whether it needs a ration or not, and then which type. Moving down to the next box, you can see that this would be standard information. The county, the producer, phone number, his address, his or her address, the city, the zip, and email. We'd like to have you check whether it's a round bale or a small square bale or a large square bale, and then describe that hay or haylage. We've given you two boxes and they're to put information in. The first one tends to be about the forage itself, first cutting, second cutting, but there's no restriction of what goes in that box. Just something that describes that forage. We really intend the second box, the other description, to be what the farmer would call it. And I've given you an example, barn lot hay, for example. Moving on down the page, you can see that we then want you to mark, and this would be important whether it's going to be entered into the contest or not, because this is what kind of forage it is really important for the NIR when we measure the quality. So go ahead and mark whether it's going to be in the contest or not, whether it's alfalfa grass, a mixed grass and legume, a pure grass, and if it's a pure grass, then we want you to indicate what kind of grass and whether it's Kentucky 31, and by that we would assume that it's the toxic Kentucky 31. If it's another grass, if say it's bluegrass, then mark that as well. If it is a summer annual, then check that, and then you need to specify which one. Similarly, in the silage class, that you would mark alfalfa grass, and so on. In the silage class, we've got a category that we don't have in the hay class, and that is the small grain. Now, something that we were unsure of, or at least some were unsure of, a producer can enter as many can test and have tested in this hay, we call it the broad hay contest, as they want. They can enter as many as they want, more than one type of alfalfa, more than one type or field of alfalfa grass. But for the contest's sake, only the best testing sample in a particular class will be considered for an award. Okay. All right. So another crucial thing is the deadline for getting samples to quicksand is by the end of the workday on Friday, October the 9th. So let's take a look at the entry of information for cattle, for example, which is the first page I pulled up. This is going to look, again, quite a bit different than years past. We've got more space to get this filled out. The top part of the form is selecting the animal type. The bottom part that you can't see right this minute is selecting the feeds that you want to use. The first set of animals are going to be growing animals, and you can mark that whichever one applies, and then please indicate how much gain you expect them to get to make, or the farmer expects the animals to gain. The next group is going to be the the older animals, pregnant yearling heifers and so on, and mark whatever is appropriate that this hay is going to be fed to. The bottom of the page is slightly different too. We've added a couple of new choices. Some of these are the same as before. Concentrate is mostly the same as before. We have added the chance to say that you're using a custom mix, and this will be true on all three, both the cattle and the goat and the horse examples. But if you're using a custom mix, please specify the composition. In other words, the ingredient and how much that ingredient is in the mix. Protein supplements, if you're feeding any one of these, please indicate that. If you're feeding a protein tub, or the producer is going to be feeding a protein tub, please take a picture of the label and send that to Dr. Jeff Lemcooler. Now, I need to also remind you at this point that we need to have on any piece on this picture and anything else, that sample lab number needs to be associated with it. And I failed to mention this at the top of the page, so I will go back up to the top of the cattle page, that when you get, if you're going to have the Dr. Lemcooler do a ration for for the hay that you're testing on the farm, you need to physically write the lab number on that page, because at some point these pages are not going to be physically together, and we need to be able to, if we run across just one page, then we need to be able to track that back to the lab number. So it's very critical that the lab number be on every single part, or every single piece of information or piece of paper or electronic file that we generate for that sample. All right, let's go down and look at the goat information, or the entry for goats. And same thing applies. If you were going to request a ration for goats for the sample you're taking, the very first thing you do is write that lab number in the upper right of that form, and then select the type of animal it is, the weight, and where they're growing, the expected rate of gain. I believe you've always had this option, but we want you to select the type of goat, and we've added some new choices for this year. Dr. Andrews needs this in order to use the ration balancing program he uses correctly. Similar to cattle, we have a concentrate side and a protein supplement side, and you can see the choices that you have on the concentrate, or the energy concentrate side. Again, we've got a chance to select if we're going to use a commercial feed. If you do that, then send a picture of that label to Dr. Andrews. And again, whatever on that digital file, make sure you associate the lab number with it. And then also any other feeds you might be feeding, like cottonseed hulls. On the protein supplement side, you can see we've got soybean hulls and so on. And here is where that if you're buying a three-way mix of ingredients with soy hulls and corn gluten and so on, specify the ingredients and specify what % they are of the mix. And Dr. Andrews would also like you to give him this information as well. Do your goats have access to pasture during the time they'll be fed the hay? If yes, is this pasture hilly, rolling, or fairly flat? So let's move to the horse entry form. And again, first thing you would do, transfer that lab number onto this page and write it in at the top of the page. Indicate the breed, If it's a mature horse, indicate the level of activity and their weight, or how much they're going to be working per week and the weight. If it's a breeding horse, then you can see the information needed there, and young horses as well. The concentrate section is different than the other two. So Dr. Coleman would like to have you indicate what type of concentrate you're going to be feeding. If you have a commercial feed, the name and the company was very important, and also a copy of that feed tag. It would be very important to get that to Dr. Coleman, and again with information about the sample lab number. And here's where, if you buy a premix of ingredients, a 3-way or a 2-way mix, indicate the ingredients and the percent of the mix. Dr. Coleman has given you the option of telling him you may be feeding some other feeds as well, beet pulp, soybean hull, soybean meal, and so on. So you can see that we've got a lot of ways to describe what it is that the producer wants to be feeding in addition to the hay that you're testing. And just to recap, the sample lab number is probably the lab number, and having that on a label is probably the single biggest change to the contest this year. When you go to the farm, you will leave the farm with the paperwork with lab numbers on it. You'll also leave the farm with a Ziploc bag with one of these sample labels on it as well that corresponds to your entry form. And keeping that right is going to be very, very important to making this contest work this year. Thank you very much. I am going to now, in another Zoom session, record the information entry process, which is on a spreadsheet. So thank you so much for being part of the 2020 Eastern Kentucky Hay Contest. And I do want to thank the agents for their leadership over quite a long period of time for this significant contest. Thank you very much.